And I will welcome Sumanto Guho as the faculty member of this today's VCM. And I also I am finding here Devan Patro, who is the RCM of EIRC for the current financial year. He is the treasurer of the EIRC. I'll also welcome him to this VCM. I find Ashokda. Ashokda, are you here? Ashokda, you kindly unmute yourself.
Very much here.
All right. Or I just ask Devan Patro to give the, as he's the moderator today, to give the introduction.
Okay. So a very good morning to each and everyone. Thank you for joining this seminar on Code of Ethics. In fact, you all must be knowing that this is a mandatory seminar that we have to attend. We have to complete 2 CP hours under Code of Ethics and another 2 CP hours under auditing standards as mandated by ICAI. So I'm very thankful to the Howrah Chartered Accountants Study Circle for holding this program on Code of Ethics. So I'm also very thankful to CA Shumantro Guho, who is a past chairman of EIRC, Central Council member for 6 years from the Eastern region. And we are very thankful to him for having taken our invitation, having accepting our invitation, and he's going to deliberate on the topic today. And I'm also thankful to the participants who have joined this program, because at the end of the day, these seminars are for the members. I'm also thankful to CA Shuman Chaudhuri, who is handling the complete technical affairs of holding this program on Zoom. And finally, although CA Ashok Shamanto probably he's unable to hear us, he has been a very good help, and he has taken the initiative from the end of the Howrah Chartered Accountant Study Circle so that the Howrah CA Study Circle could have hold similar programs. So we had one on auditing standards, and now we are holding this on Code of Ethics. So I think it's better to go into the topic first, and we can have question and answers and other discussions towards the end of the program. So with this, before I hand over to CA Shumantro Guho, I would request CA Shuman Chaudhuri to see if there is any other formality to be done. Otherwise, he can formally hand over the proceedings to CA Shumantro Guho.
Thank you, Devan. I can see some of the participants still not yet renamed themselves, in the process of renaming themselves. I will also request all the participants to keep themselves in a mute mode. If they have anything to say to me or as a whole to all of the participants, they must go to the chat and type it in the chat box. And we can see their questions. We can also address their question at the end of the session. Devan will moderate all the questions you have in the chat box. And our learned speaker, Sri Sumanto Guho, will be answering all the questions. And I'll also thank Ashok the Howrah chapter for organizing this VCM. I, on the part of the technical part, I'll be there with you for the whole day. And Sumanto will giving his presentations. And thank you, Sumanto. I think Sumanto does not require any more introduction. I'm not going to read his CV. I'll just hand over to him. Thanks to Sumanto and all over to you.
Thank you, Suman. Thank you.
Thank you, Ashok.
Thank you very much, Shuman, Devan, and all the office bearers of the Howrah Study Circle. I can find in the gallery view many members with whom I regularly interact in WhatsApp groups. Ashok Shamanto is there, Pawanji is there also. We have Vasantji here, Proshupto is there, Shumindro is there, Partho Pratim Ghosh, many others with whom we regularly interact in various WhatsApp groups. Now, the topic for the discussion is Code of Ethics. And as rightly pointed out by Shuman, that this requires, there is a mandate from the CP Directorate that you have to clock in 2 CP hours every year, all those who are in practice. on code of ethics, and there are 2 more hours on standards on auditing, of course. But now we will be discussing only code of ethics.
Yes.
Friends, this code of ethics actually came into being in 1963 as code of conduct, because I remember when I qualified, along with after the pass certificate came and all the documents came, when I became a member, along with that 2 books came. One was code of conduct. At that time it was still named as code of conduct, not code of ethics. And later on and some other material also came, but whenever the booklet used to come for any member who has joined the membership afresh, the code of conduct book used to come.
Sumantata, you are not audible. Sumantata,
Sir, you have to unmute yourself. Somehow it got muted.
এটা কখন হলো এটা? আচ্ছা ঠিক আছে ঠিক আছে, সরি, এটা কোনো কারণে হয়ে গেছে আর কি। তো ঠিক আছে, so so it was known as code of conduct. Later on it was named as code of ethics in 2005, and the code of ethics that we will be discussing today is the 12th edition of the code of ethics. In fact, the code of ethics has become compulsory from 1st of July 2020, and it has come out in 3 volumes, volume 1, volume 2, and volume 3. Volume 1 deals with, they are at par with the International Ethics Standards Board for Accountants, the IESBA, which was issued by the IESBA. As you know that the Institute of Chartered Accountants of India is a member of IFAC, and IFAC has this Ethics Standards Board for Accountants. So we had to align with the IFAC Code of Ethics. But it is also true that our Code of Ethics, which was there earlier to the IFAC Code of Ethics also, was in many cases more stricter and more stringent than the IFAC Code of Ethics. Like the IFAC Code of Ethics spoke about statutory auditor and internal auditor in special circumstances could do both statutory audit and internal audit. Fees could be charged on as a percentage of the gains on contingency and things like that, which were not there in our statute. Of course, in our statute, we have certain exemptions which are there in Regulation 192 of the CA Regulations 1988, where we can charge on a percentage. But apart from that, our code was more stringent, more stricter than what was prevalent in IFAC and what was being prescribed in the International Ethics Standards Board for Accountants. Now, the new IESBA Code of Ethics has come in 2018, and after that, the new code that has come from 1st July 2020 has been in alignment with the 2018 IESBA, and from 1st July 2020, the volume 1, which is at par with the ISBA, has been put in public domain and is a mandatory document to be followed by all members. And volume 2 discusses about domestic provisions, which we will be discussing more on the domestic provisions, of course, now. And volume 3 deals with only case laws, which has not yet been made mandatory, because that book has the volume 3, all the 3 volumes are in the website of the institute, ici.org, but they have not been made mandatory. The volume 3 has not been made mandatory, but volume 1 and 2 has been made mandatory. Now, I would request Devan to kindly do the slideshow. If I'll just say next, and you can go to the next slide. So, Devan, if you could go to the next slide. Yes. Now, this is, as I said, this is the 12th edition, and the 11th edition was published in 2009. If you see the top, 2009 edition versus revised edition. After that, a lot of things have come up. A lot of council guidelines have come up. CA Amendment Act has taken place. A lot of things have taken place. So in order to put everything in one place, the 2019 revised edition was prepared by the Ethical Standards Board and put in public domain. So as I said, the 2009, there were two parts also. Like we have volume 1 and volume 2, they had part A and part B. Part A was aligned with the IFAC and part B was the domestic provisions. Those were valid till 30th of June 2020. And from 1st July 2020, the new revised code is applicable. And it also mentions what I've said, the domestic provisions are there, and updated relevant disciplinary case laws issued as Code of Ethics in volume 3, and all 3 volumes are there in our institute website. Divan, next. Now the council at its 393rd meeting held on 30th of June to 1st July decided that three provisions of volume 1 of Code of Ethics will be deferred till further notification. And these are the most 3 important aspects of volume 1 of the code. And those have been deferred till further notification, mainly due to the pandemic, because the pandemic broke out in the last week of March, and perhaps the institute felt that it would be difficult for members to comply with these 3 provisions, and hence these 3 provisions have been deferred. Those are responding to non-compliance of laws and regulations. There are separate slides for that. I will come to it. Then fees relative size, where there was a restriction on 15% of the fee size, and taxation services to audit clients. So all these 3 important provisions have been deferred, but the other provisions have come into force from 1st July 2020. Next. Now this is, as I said, the 12th edition, and various awareness programs are being held across the country to assist the members so that they can properly comply with the Code of Ethics. Next. Now this is the volume 1. Now 5 most important substantive changes that has been made from the 2009 to the 2019 code. We will be mainly discussing in this 1.5 hour presentation, because last half an hour I will be keeping for question answers, because there could be many question answers. But this 1 to 1 hour 10 minutes of my discussion will mainly focus on the differences and the changes that have come about between 2009 to 2019. Now, as I said, in 2019, responding to non-compliance of laws and regulations, people fondly are calling it NOCLAR for convenience. Then restriction on taxation services to audit clients have come. Prohibition on management responsibilities to the audit clients, that is not very important, but that has come into force from 1st July 2020. We'll be discussing, there are separate slides for that. Safeguards on fees from single client, that is that 15% cap, that will also be discussed. And duty of accountant in case of breach of independent standards. These are the 5 most important changes. Next. And these are, yes. Now, a professional accountant in IFAC parlance is called a chartered accountant. They call them professional accountant. And in the Code of Ethics, an individual who is a member of the Institute of Chartered Accountants of India is also called a professional accountant. And a professional accountant in business implies members who are employees working in a particular organization. Could be a service organization, could be a manufacturing organization, could be an employee of a CA firm also. They are known as professional accountants in business. But this is not a very important slide. Anyway, next. Now, as I said, this is a view of the 2 parts, part A and part B, which existed earlier in 2009. Next. Now the 2019 has got the part A and B has been renamed as part 1 and part 2, as I said. part 1 is applicable to all professional accountants, complying with the code, fundamental principles and conceptual framework. Part 2 is professional accountants in business, and part 3 is professional accountants in public practice. So this is the breakup of the volume 1 only, not the volume 2. The volume 1, which is aligned with IFAC, has been broken down like this. Next. Now, the important issue which I would like to say is that the earlier code of ethics also was issued as a guideline of the council. This is a very important word which I would like everyone to understand and remember. Was issued as a guideline of the council. It was a council guideline basically. Okay. Now, what is the consequence of a council guideline? One must understand that. What is a council guideline? If there is non-compliance of a council guideline, then it will be deemed as a violation of clause 1 of part 2 of the second schedule of the CA Act 1949. That is very important. So, if anyone violates any guideline of the council, it will result in a violation of clause 1 and part 2 of second schedule of the CA Act 1949, and that member will be deemed to be guilty of professional misconduct if he contravenes any of the provisions of this act or the regulations made thereunder or any guidelines issued by the council. So that is very important. So we have to abide by the code as it has been issued as a guideline to the council. Next. Now, new pattern of structuring, this is not very important. We can skip this. Now, responding to non-compliance with laws and regulations, new provision, as I said, it refers to any act of commission or omission or commission committed by client or employer contrary to prevailing laws.
Sumantata, you are not audible properly.
The next slide,
Check your internet
explain this provision better. Devan, the next slide. Connection.
Sumantata, your net is not working properly. You are not audible.
এবার দেখো ঠিক আছে, হ্যাঁ এবার ঠিক আছে, এবার ঠিক আছে মনে হয় না, আমার তো নেট তো কাজ করছে পুরো। দাঁড়াও নেটটা দাঁড়া, 1 মিনিট দাঁড়াও।
You can put your video on off mode and you can carry on.
আচ্ছা, ভিডিওটাকে অফ করে দিই তাহলে। এবার ঠিক আছে তো, দেখো তো ঠিক আছে? হ্যাঁ একদম ঠিক আছে, হ্যাঁ ঠিক আছে, আমি ভিডিও অফ করে দিয়েছি, ঠিক আছে। আচ্ছা, NOCLAR. Now the applicability of NOCLAR, as I said, it has been deferred till further notification. Now it is only applicable to listed entities. That is the silver lining. It is not applicable to audits for any non-corporates or for unlisted entities or for private limited companies. And the beauty of NOCLAR is it is also applicable to employees of listed entities. That means since the volume 1 of the Code of Ethics discusses about professional accountants in practice as well as professional accountants in business, so employees who are working in listed entities will also have to follow these, will also have to ensure that NOCLAR is being followed. That means there should not be any non-compliance of other laws and regulations. So it is equally applicable to members in practice as well as members in service also. So this is very important. At times people feel that if I am in service, I am not covered by any of the provisions of the Code of Ethics, but that is not correct. They will also be covered. Next, Devan. Regulations that have a nexus, yes. Now, what is NOCLAR? I'll just briefly tell you in half a minute. while doing the attest function, while discharging the attest function, you have to ensure that all related laws other than financial laws are also being complied with by the auditee or the client. If it is not adhered to by the auditee or the client, then you have to qualify your report. This is from the professional accountant's point of view. And from the professional accountants in business point of view, means those who are employees, when they present the accounts, because the responsibility of preparation of accounts is with the management. Now, when they prepare and present the accounts before the auditors, they must also ensure that laws and regulations which are connected to the financial laws which normally an auditor sees are also adhered to. Otherwise, this will lead to a non-compliance of other laws and regulations and penalty under NOCLAR. Now, what are the examples? You read the last line of this slide. Examples of laws and regulations required to be addressed are fraud, corruption and bribery, money laundering, terrorist financing and proceeds of crime, securities market and trading, etc. Now, the institute also cannot actually write all the examples, cannot give all the examples of laws and regulations that are required to be addressed. Like in the some other speaker I was hearing was speaking about NOCLAR and saying that suppose your client is in the construction industry, your client is in the business of is a promoter, and he constructs flats and sells those flats. Now, if he violates the laws of the local municipal corporation and builds another floor on top of the floors where he is permitted to build, and then he sells them, and if while doing the audit, we have to ensure that if the auditee, whether he has followed the laws framed by the local municipal corporation or not, and if he finds that there is any violation, then he has to report in NOCLAR. So this list is endless actually, basically, but the institute has given some guidance as to what should be followed, because this money laundering and all, terrorist financing and proceeds of crime are coming under Prevention of Money Laundering Act 2002. So we will have to look into various other laws. We have to look into Benami law. We'll have to look into Banning of Unregulated Deposit Schemes Act 2019. We will have to look into other laws which directly or indirectly has a relationship with our attest function. Next, Divan. Following. Yes. Now, as far as firm rotation is concerned, we are aware that the requirements, there are no the firm rotation is required as far as the Companies Act 2013 is concerned. It stipulates only firm rotation, but it doesn't stipulate any partner rotation, which also should exist along with audit firm rotation, whether prescribed by a statute or not. And let me tell you that there are certain statutes like SEBI, like RBI, and there are other statutes also where say that you must also go for partner rotation along with firm rotation. If that be the case, then partner rotation also has to be done. Next slide. একটু ওই আগেরটা দেবে একটু আচ্ছা আচ্ছা আমি এটা জাস্ট বলে দিচ্ছি আচ্ছা এইটার পরেরটাই যাও হ্যাঁ ব্যাস so what I meant to say is similarly partner rotation requirements prescribed by certain regulators such as RBI, certain NBFCs, etc. shall prevail and mute করে নিন একটু হ্যাঁ and for a listed entity, SEBI prescribes SQC1 also. You know SQC1. SQC1 says that if a partner is engaged in doing an audit, he can do the audit for 7 years. The same partner can be the engagement partner for 7 years. Then there has to be a 2-year cooling off. And after a 2-year cooling off, then once again he can come back. The 2 years, some other engagement partner will be responsible for conducting the audit. So there it speaks about partner rotation. The code also speaks about partner rotation for best for maximum for the best possible governance. Acha, next stage. Yes. Now this is as I said, management responsibility and administrative services. This is applicable from 1st July 2020. This has not been deferred. The one I have discussed has been deferred is the NOCLAR one so far. I've not discussed about the other two, that is the taxation services to clients and the restriction on single fees. Now read this carefully. There is a new section dealing with management responsibilities. A firm cannot assume a management responsibility for an audit client. But however, providing advice and recommendations to assist the management of an audit client in discharging its responsibilities is not assuming a management responsibility. Providing administrative services to an audit client does not usually create a threat. Examples of administrative services include word processing services, preparing administrative or statutory forms for client approval, submitting such forms as instructed by the client, and monitoring statutory filing dates and advising an audit client of those dates. Now, these activities are permissible. These are administrative activities. And by this, you are not assuming a management responsibility. So there is no conflict of interest. And you can do these administrative services. Next. Now comes the second second issue which I was discussing, and this provision section 604 has been deferred for now till further notification. Now what does this say? It says that taxation to audit client, including compliance, planning, provision of formal taxation opinions and assistance in resolution of tax disputes to discuss. The next slide will be more meaningful. Let's go to the next slide. Now before I speak about this, I would just like to say that the code also speaks about, which is not there in the slides, the code speaks about 5 threats. There are 5 threats of independence. What are the 5 threats? One is self-interest threat, one is self-review threat, one is advocacy threat, one is familiarity threat, and one is intimidation threat. I'll just briefly give one example each of every threat. What is a self-interest threat? Suppose if someone has quoted very low fees for conducting an assignment, or there is a relationship with the client, he is enjoying some other pecuniary relationship with the client, that gives rise to a self-interest threat which should be avoided. Now what is self-review threat? The second one, self-review threat is if you are the maker as well as the checker. You cannot be maker and checker both. That means you can't do any work and then review your own work. So that is self-review threat. Your review gets impaired. Your function of review gets impaired. Advocacy threat. Advocacy threat is acting as an advocate or acting as you represent a client before taxation authorities, before other statutory authorities. So that there you have to save your client, and there you compromise you compromise, and that gives rise to advocacy threat. Now this is from the standpoint of the auditors. If you are an auditor, then these are the threats that are prevalent if you do those additional functions. Familiarity threat. Suppose your spouse is the CFO of the auditee, or your brother-in-law is working in that company in a very senior position, a senior finance position. There it will give rise to familiarity threat, because you are familiar to that person, and normally you will be hand in glove with Arch. And the last is intimidation threat. Intimidation threat is suppose you are being intimidated by the client. Suppose you go to bank audit and you said that I will make this NPA because it is affecting the prudential norms. It is I will reclassify the asset and make it substandard or doubtful. And then the bank says that we will see that how you get appointed next year, or you are heralded by, or you are heralded by people, and the bank manager says that the account you are discussing about belongs to this person and he has come here to speak to you and things like that. So you get intimidated also at times. So these are the 5 threats which are prevalent, and first we have to identify the threat, and then we'll have to try to mitigate the threat so that it is reduced to an acceptable level. And if at all we are unable to mitigate or reduce the threat, then we have to ultimately leave the assignment if you feel that the threat cannot be mitigated or the threat cannot be reduced to an acceptable level. Now coming back to the slide, taxation services of audit clients. Tax calculations for the purpose of preparing accounting entries, it creates a self-review threat, because you are the auditor, you are the statutory auditor, and you are calculating the taxation for the purpose of preparing accounting entries. That creates a self-review threat. Now, tax planning or other tax advisory services might create self-review advocacy threat. Appropriate safeguards to be adopted, as for example, using professionals who are not the audit team members. Suppose you have sent a team, you are auditing, 4 people are auditing, but in your firm you have other people also, other members also, other partners also, who don't do audit, they do only tax. So you employ them to perform the tax advisory services. That will reduce the self-review or the advocacy threat to a great extent. Next. Tax services involving valuations might perform only when the result of valuation will not have a direct effect on the financial statements. Of course, later on we'll be coming into management consultancy services, where they have allowed valuation services and IBBI services also. They have been included in the management consultancy services also, as mentioned in section 2.2 subsection 4 of the CA Act 1949. Assistance in the resolution of tax disputes, it might create a self-review or advocacy threat, because if you not to provide involves acting as an advocate for the audit client, or amounts involved are material to the financial statements on which the firm will express an opinion. Next. New introduction in 2019 code, the safeguards that I was talking about. Identified threats must be addressed in one of the 3 ways. I'd eliminate circumstances, apply the safeguards, or decline or end the service. We will not like to decline or end the service, obviously. So we will try to apply safeguards so that these threats are mitigated to the maximum possible extent. Next. Documentation, I think I had said the earlier slide to dekhao to Devan, ठीक आगे slide ta. No, ठीक है, you go to the next slide. Yes. And now the fees, the third important point, that is the fees. So I discussed about NOCLAR. I've discussed about taxation services to clients which have been deferred but not done away with. Now I'm coming to the fees relative size. Now go to the next slide, it will explain better. আরেকটু পরেরটা, আচ্ছা আগেরটাই চলে যাও, ফিজটা আগেরটা, দুটো আগেরটাই চলে যাও। হ্যাঁ, আচ্ছা, the new paragraph safeguards to be taken if there is fees dependence on more than 15% on one audit client. So earlier the law, the 2009 code of ethics said that it was 40%, not 15%. So you cannot have a single client where the audit fees was more than 40% of your total billings in a year. Suppose your total billings in a year was 10 lakhs. So you cannot have a client having audit fees of 4 lakhs or above. That was the earlier law in 2009. In 2019, they have said that the dependence of more than 15% on one audit client should not be there. but there are exceptions to it. What are the exceptions? That is, if total fees of the firm is less than 5 lakhs per annum, then this clause is not applicable. This dependence clause is not applicable. And in the case of audit of government companies, public undertakings, nationalized banks, public financial institutions, or where appointments of auditors are made by the government, there these provisions are subject to review and appropriate clarification to be given through questions and answers. That means the above provisions are subject to review because there are many people who rely mostly on bank audit, or the SMP sector. They rely on bank audit, they rely on government audit, and it may so happen that there the percentage might be easily more than 15. So there, although the institute has said it is subject to review, these exceptions are very clear, and these exceptions will prevail. So there is no, for any auditor who have income of less than 5 lakhs, and those who have audit of government companies, public undertakings, or nationalized banks, where the fee is 15% or more of the total billing of that particular auditor. Next, Divan. Yes. Now, new provision in 2019 code, this is also important. It says that know your client, that KYC, you have to do KYC of your client when you do the attest function of a client. So you must be aware that you have to do, you have to be very careful that you do a proper KYC of the client and keep it documented. What happens with SMP auditors is that a file comes, we obviously take their pen, we take all their documents, but those are not properly documented and filed. So those need to be properly documented, filed, from whose reference the work had come, and so on and so forth, so that later on, after 10 years, 15 years, if the file is retrieved, a person will be able to know the whereabouts of the client and his history also, his transaction history also, and whether he is a desirable, he could be a desirable client or an undesirable client. That is also very important. Next paragraph, next one. Yes. So the five things, as I said, I have discussed the three most important issues in volume 1. Which has been deferred, which has not been deferred, but I've also discussed is the KYC. I have also discussed about the administrative services that you can provide, which have not been deferred, but will be applicable from 1st July 2020. And I've also told you about the 5 threats which are required to be discussed. So we are through with the volume 1. Now we will be taking up volume 2 of the Code of Ethics. Let us start with volume 2. Now here also there have been 5 most important changes over the 2009 code. Now how these changes took place? In 2009, as I said, the last code was written, and in 2019 we have written the next revised code. And in the span of 10 years, a lot of water has flown in the Ganges. I mean, there have been a lot of amendments have taken place. There have been changes in council guidelines, changes in auditing and accounting standards. The Companies Act 2013 has come in place of Companies Act 1956. So in order to put all these documents in one place, in one book, so that for the convenience of the auditors as well as auditees and for other stakeholders also, these changes have come. These changes have all been incorporated, as I've said in the first paragraph. These changes have come in the revised Code of Ethics 2019. There have been changes in advertisement guidelines and council general guidelines. There have been changes in the commentary under clause 6 and 7 of part 1 of the first schedule. And there have been changes in the commentary under clause 8 of part 1 of the first schedule pertaining to communication. There have been other small changes here and there, but those are not very pertinent because in the given span of time, and for the members also who are attentively listening and seeing these slides also, the important changes are will have a ramification in their day-to-day practice, and hence we have picked up only 5 most important substantive changes. Next, Divan. As I said, all disciplinary cases removed and will form part of volume 3. Anyway, next. This I have already discussed earlier, this administrative services. So you can go to the next slide. This is also, as I said, that management consultancy services under 224, there are 27 services which have been permitted by the institute. These are called management consultancy services, which you can do. And here I will just briefly also discuss about corporate form of practice also. Now, in these 27 services, as I said, now you can write registered valuer after your name. Like you can write, after writing FCA, you can, or ACA, you can write registered valuer if you have passed the valuation examination conducted by the IBBI. You can also write insolvency professional if you have passed the IBBI exam. So these 2 services have also been included in the management consultancy services. And as I said, if you have to render management consultancy services, you can also do it in corporate form. If you don't want to do it as a chartered accountant firm, you can also render specialized management consultancy services. For that, you can practice in corporate form. You can open a company. Only all the directors have to be chartered accountants. Shareholders may be relatives of directors. Now, the relatives definition has also been borrowed from Section 2, subsection 77 of the Companies Act 2013, which says husband, wife, brother, sister, and any lineal ascendant or descendant. So that has been borrowed from that. So shareholders will be relatives. Directors will only be chartered accountants, and you can render all the 27 services that have been listed out by the institute under management consultancy services. Now, in the 2009, this position is prior to 2009 also. Only between 2009 and 19, 2 new services have been added, as I said. But for the sake of repetition also, I would like to say that valuation services and services as an insolvency professional have only been added. There have been small cosmetic changes that have taken place. In the 2009, the 26th service spoke about insurance financial advisory services under the Insurance Regulatory and Development Act. Here, the new provision adds the word not including insurance agency. So this is one new thing that has come up. A small cosmetic change has been done. Next, Devan. Valuation of shares of business and advice regarding amalgamation, merger and acquisition. This was in the older code 2009. In the newer code against 15, there have been a small tweaking, which I said earlier, valuation of shares and business and advice acting as registered valuer under Companies Act, that has also been added. Next, Devan. Now, new incorporations in the revised code. There are certain prohibitions. Members being directors in companies, members of political parties or CSLs in the political parties, holding different positions in clubs or other organizations, not permitted to mention these positions as they would be violative of Section 7 of the Act. So there are members who are directors in companies. You can always be an independent director in a company which is qualified to have independent directors. You can also be a director simpliciter. I'll come to that slide also later. You can also be a director simpliciter, means you cannot take director's remuneration, but you can attend meetings of the board, and you can also take sitting fees, but you will not take part in the day-to-day activities of the of the company. So you cannot write those in the cards that I'm member of I am a director of such company, or I'm a member of a political party or any CSL, because various political parties now have chartered accountant cells, and you cannot write like that because that would tantamount to advertisement. And holding positions in clubs or other organizations are also not permitted to be written. And permissible insolvency, that is I've already discussed. This is also not very significant because you can write the highest position. Anyway, next. This is on visiting cards. This was on visiting cards. Now, retirement of partners, this has been done away with. This slide is not important. Next, go to the next slide. Commentary under clause 3 and 4, referral fees. Yes. Now, this is very important. Clause 3 and 4, referral fees among the 2009 code was silent, but the new code has said that if any member of the institute refers any client to you, you can also charge referral fees from that member. I mean, you can charge means the person who has referred a client to you, referral fees has now become is now permissible, which was silent in the earlier code. It was silent. Nothing was mentioned. Now, MDPs means multidisciplinary partnerships. Now, many of you must be knowing that for a long time, we have been making a lot of noise as far as multidisciplinary partnerships are concerned, mainly through LLPs and all. Let me apprise you that we have permitted our members to become partners with advocates, with cost accountants, with company secretaries, with actuaries, with many various other professions, with engineers, with architects, with actuaries, with many professions. But we have created enabling provisions. That means a member of the institute can become members with those other professionals. But unfortunately, the other regulatory bodies of those professionals have not permitted their professionals to become partners with chartered accountants. Hence, although we have regulation 53A and 53B, which allows, but the regulators of the other professions have not yet allowed chartered accountants to become members of their fraternity. And hence, although we have created enabling provisions, it is not, we have not been able to implement the concept of having multidisciplinary partnerships in letter and spirit. And for this, the country is basically actually suffering. The society, the users of the financial statements, the government, they are suffering because the other bodies are not permitting chartered accountants to become allowing their members to be partners with chartered accountants. And as I said, a member in practice cannot become a partner, designated partner. This is also very important. A member in practice cannot become a partner, designated partner, non-working and non-remuneration drawing in an LLP not carrying out any professional work. So a member in practice can obviously become a partner in an LLP because there are many CA firms who have converted into partnerships. As you know that companies are not designated to become auditors. We all know that it is there since time immemorial that companies cannot become auditors of any concern. But a question arose at that time that whether LLPs should be treated as companies. But later on, it was decided that LLPs will also be treated as partnerships. And there are many firms, there are many big firms, I would say, who have converted their structure of their constitutional structure from partnership to LLP. But a member in practice cannot become a partner in an LLP not carrying out any professional work. But if you carry out professional work, you can become. And these LLPs which have become LLPs and doing professional work like audit and other services are all waiting for the multidisciplinary practice to flourish and start, because their basic idea of creating LLPs were to actually were to actually have multidisciplinary partnerships. But unfortunately, since this is not taking place at the moment, we will have to wait so that the other regulatory bodies will also incorporate enabling provisions in their statute to permit chartered accountants to be partners with their members. Next. Now, this is very important, guidance to tenders. Initially, prior to 2006, it was prohibited for a CA firm to respond to tenders. But as the days went by, and it was difficult for the government also to, it was difficult for the ICI also to explain to the government over and over again, that please understand that we cannot respond to a tender. But they said that, see, we have a particular procedure. If your members are interested in doing our professional assignments, then we have to go by the tender process. There is no other way by which we can invite and select people to do our work. So we have to go by a proper tender process. And later on, the institute also felt that if we stick to our position, the prior to 2006 position, then it may so happen that many professional work may go away from the chartered accountants. And hence we decided that we should respond to tenders, and undercutting was also done away with in the 2006 Amendment Act, because in those days, when the undercutting was not allowed, the bigger firms could quote a particular amount, and the same work could have been done maybe by a medium-sized firm or a medium to large-sized firm at 60 to 70% of the fees that were being charged by the very big firms. But since undercutting was not permitted at that point of time, they were not in a position, those medium firms were not in a position to quote for such tenders. And hence, the institute in 2006 had to do away with undercutting. But what happened in the process, the provisions were abused to a great extent. Undercutting provisions were abused to a great extent, and people started quoting very low fees, thereby actually disturbing the entire fabric. They disturbed the very purpose for which undercutting was done away with. And hence the institute was forced on the 7th of April 2016. If you read this guideline, it says a member of the institute in practice shall not respond to any tender issued by an organization or user of professional services in areas of service which are exclusively reserved for chartered accountants, such as audit and attestation services. However, such restrictions shall not be applicable where minimum fee of the assignment is prescribed in the tender document itself, or where the areas are open to other professionals along with chartered accountants. Like an internal audit, because I will spend 5 minutes on this, because this is a very important thing, which is a bread and butter issue of our profession. Of course, now the butter has disappeared because of the corona and all, only we have bread and dry bread only. But as far as this guideline is concerned, so if it is an assignment where only chartered accountants can be appointed, if it is an attest function, then minimum fees has to be mentioned in the audit assignment. Then only a chartered accountant can respond to such a tender. But if it is an internal audit or any audit where it is open to other professionals also, like cost accountants, like now section 138 of the Companies Act 2013 says that cost accountant, no, that talks about cost audit. Anyway, cost accountants can also undertake internal audits, or any other professional, a company, a body corporate can also undertake internal audits. So in that case, we cannot kill the profession. We have to ensure that our professionals are also, they can use their skills to serve their the clients. Hence, we have said very clearly that if this assignment is open to other professionals, chartered accountants can also apply. We have also said in the FAQs on tenders, we have also said that suppose there is an internal audit assignment for which any government organization has floated a tender, but they would only like to take chartered accountants. There are many cases, umpteen number of cases. I think 90% of the tenders which are issued by the government organizations for internal audit, they don't include cost accountants. They only invite applications from chartered accountants and chartered accountants only. In fact, even if they float those tenders where they invite applications, expression of interest from chartered accountants only, then also the chartered accountants can apply in spite of the fact that other professionals have not been invited. So that is very important. There are some members who keep on asking me that this invitation is only for chartered accountants, but I said no, this invitation is, they have invited you, giving due respect to our profession. They have invited you, but this work can be done. This assignment can be done by other professionals also. And hence, you can obviously respond to such tenders. Exorbitant EMD, anyway, that ESD. Next, Devan. Using of CPA on visiting cards. Now, 2009 code said that the members are not permitted to use the initial CPA, which meant Certified Public Accountant. Revised code says that mentioning qualifications of accounting institutes which have MRA MOU with ICI is permitted. If you go to the website of the institute, there is a whole list of institutes with whom the institute has an MRA or a MOU. And accordingly, if you fall under that, if your qualification falls under that, then you can write those qualifications also on your visiting cards. Next. Sponsoring activities, this is not very important. A member of firm not permitted to sponsor an event, however, may sponsor an event conducted by a CPE, by a POU of ICI, provided it has prior approval of the continuing professional education. And members sponsoring activities relating to CSR may mention their individual name with prefix CA. However, the mention of firm name or CA logo is not permitted. There are many members who are members of Lions clubs or Rotary clubs or other social clubs. There also a lot of CSR activities take place. And if you sponsor a CSR activity, you can write your name, but with the prefix CA only. But the mention of your firm name is prohibited. And you can sponsor an event conducted by a program organizing unit of ICI. But now, since virtual programs will take place, I think till the end of this year, the question of this will only may arise only at the beginning of the next year. Next. Advertisement of teaching, coaching institutes. The 2009 code, the however, Code of Ethics is silent on advertising. The new code, provisions of ICI announcement 18/5/17 says there is a bar on advertisement of coaching or teaching activities incorporated. And of course, it says that educational videos may be uploaded by members. However, no reference should be made to the CA firm wherein he may be a partner or proprietor. So there could be members who are engaged in coaching activities or teaching activities. There is a bar on such advertisements on teaching and coaching activities, but educational videos can be uploaded without mentioning your firm name. Next, Devan. Advertisement, other changes. Members' firm name may be allowed in TV, movie credits, provided not mentioned differently from others, from other person. Suppose you appear in a chat show, or you appear on television, and there you can mention your name, your firm name also, but it should not be mentioned differently from other persons. Like you are, I am a partner of a particular firm, which is a reputed firm and a well-known firm, having 18 partners, 16 partners. You cannot mention it differently from others. तो आगे स्लाइड के एकटू देखियो. Yes. ना एरপর এটা. Your name can only be mentioned. Sharing of firm details during interview not to result in publicity, and any detail to be given on a specific question and of factual nature only. Suppose you have shared your name only. Suppose I have gone to a TV interview, I'm saying I'm C.A. Shumantro Guo, and I discuss something relating to financial matters. Now, if there is a specific question, now at times it happens now, now all viewers can also ask questions. So if there is a specific question from any of the viewers of that program, or from the person who is moderating the program, and saying that what is the firm name, we can only give factual information, but we cannot advertise in any manner our firm name or anything of that sort. Next. Firm name is not permitted while authoring a book. Now, the existing code 2009 was silent, but the new code has said, considering the need of interpersonal socialization, because social media has become very important, it has become very, very vibrant also. So, considering the need of interpersonal socialization and relationship of members through such get-together occasions, advertisement for silver, golden, diamond, platinum, or centenary celebrations of CA firms may be published in newspapers. Suppose I have completed 50 years of practice. The firm has completed 50 years of practice, and it wants to invite all former articles who are now chartered accountants in other firms and who are members. So these advertisements are permitted to be published in newspapers, which can also call in clients and all, though existing, old, whatever clients, family members of those who are article clerks, in article assistants in those firms and all. So those have been permitted in the 2019 code. Next. Now this illumination of signboard, the existing provision said that the signboard should be put up in a decent manner, and use of glow signs or neon lights on large size signboards as is used by traders or shopkeepers would not be proper. Very correct, because that should be there. Now in the revised code, they have said that while keeping in mind the appropriate visibility and illumination of the signboard. In other words, it means that suppose your office is somewhere from evening 6 o'clock onwards, or from evening 7 o'clock onwards, when your office is not visible, and there is a signboard, it should be appropriately visible to a person who wants to visit your office. It should be appropriately illuminated, but it should not smack of any undue advertisement like glow signs or neon lights on large size boards should not be put. The institute basically has left it to the member concerned for their judgment to interpret and understand and realize what is meant by appropriate visibility and appropriate illumination. Next. Members may appear on television, as I said, films. Only the revised provisions of the new code shown in underlined. So members now can appear in internet, can have firm name may also be mentioned. However, any exaggerated claim or any kind of comparison is not permissible. I think I've already discussed it in the earlier slides. Next. Yes, now modes of communication. This is clause 8, part 1 of schedule 1. Now, so far, what was happening, the existing code said that you can only communicate with the previous auditor. Suppose you have been appointed a new auditor, you are the incoming auditor, and there is a retiring auditor who has retired. You could have sent the letter in by registered acknowledgement due or by hand against a written acknowledgement. In the normal course, would have provided such evidence. Now the new code has said that it can also be given, or it is and or both. You can still continue to give registered acknowledgement due. You can send it by post, but you can also communicate with the retiring auditor via email address registered with the institute or the last known official email address. Even if you communicate, that would tantamount to proper communication, and you will not be hauled up by the institute for not communicating with the retiring auditor, because 60 to 70% of the Schedule 1 cases which come into Board of Discipline are cases which have problems with communication. Now, through unique identification, I would request others to mute themselves, please. Through unique identification through UDIN, generated on UDIN portal, that has not yet come. But the purpose of this slide is to understand that it should come. We can also send it via email. For it,
Unmute yourself.
জানি
অনেকক্ষণ কাজ করেছো।
নিতাই দা একটু মিউট করুন আপনাকে। হ্যাঁ হ্যাঁ করে দিয়েছি, ঠিক আছে। হ্যাঁ হ্যাঁ
বন্ধুরা মাইক্রোফোনটা একটু
এটা
জোরে
হয়ে গেছে।
করুন।
হ্যাঁ এবার নেক্সট। হ্যাঁ নেক্সট আচ্ছা আচ্ছা, no duty is cast on the previous auditor. That means for any change of auditorship, there will be no duty is cast on the previous auditor. As you know, nowadays in Companies Act 2013 also, changing of an auditor has become very difficult, in the sense that you are appointed for a period of at least 5 years, and ratification in every AGM also has been done away with. And after 5 years, you are once again eligible for reappointment. And for those companies which are under rotation, for a particular firm, it is 10 years, and for a particular individual, if he is appointed for an incoming auditor, normally appointed, normally it is difficult for incoming auditor to come into the picture before the normal completion of the audit tenure as far as Companies Act is concerned. Auditor, not the retiring auditor, to the existing auditor also. Next, Divan. Now, addressing peculiar circumstances while communicating. এটা ভালো করে দেখুন, premises are locked. ধরে নিন premises of the previous auditor is locked. 2009 code was silent. Revised code বলছে communication received back by the incoming auditor with office found locked written on AD shall be deemed as delivered. এটা ভালো করে দেখুন, will be deemed as delivered. Next, form not found at the given registered address. 2009 এ কিছু বলেনি, revised code বলছে communication sent by with remarks no such office exists at this address, and address is registered with the institute, it will be deemed to be delivered until and unless the retiring auditor can prove that he was not responsible for such non-service. Achha, communication in case of certification, it is a healthy practice, it said. Now it has been dispensed with. That means if you have to issue a certificate, not an audit report, you may not communicate with the earlier auditor. That has been dispensed with. Next. Next. Provisions in the revised code. I discussed this. Ensuring compliance with provision 225, যেটা আগে of clause 9 of second schedule, that has now come in section 129 and 7,000. Since you are appointed for 5 years and no ratification is required, you are appointed in a particular year for 5 years straight away. So if at all the client has to change the auditor, then it has to remove you and you have to file ADT 3. Otherwise, you will not be removed. And you know, nowadays various regulators have become very strict with filing of ADT 3. You just cannot write that I want to resign due to personal reasons and things like that. And hence I don't want to continue the audit.
I can, no, Sumanta, I can resign on the ground that the recommended fees of the institute are not given by the client. Then
last 10 years. question গুলো লাস্ট এ নিয়ে একদম একটু কোয়েশ্চেন গুলো আমি লাস্টে নিচ্ছি, একবার শেষ করে নিই একসঙ্গে, আধ ঘন্টা পুরো কোয়েশ্চেন নেবো, কোনো চিন্তা করবেন না। হ্যাঁ হ্যাঁ, যেটা বলছিলাম এবার যেটা হলো যে দেন ADT 3 I have to file now. Many regulators have a reservation about ADT 3. They are saying that you are pressurizing the auditor to resign and telling him to file ADT 3 because most of them were writing personal grounds. Now, in the case of a company called Reliance Power, the concerned auditor gave a detailed reason why he has to resign, which said that we were not getting proper access to books of accounts, we were not satisfied and things like that. So on and so forth. Even in fact, SEBI also now has said that in the fourth quarter, when you do the fourth quarter, you do 2 limited reviews, you know, June and September. Sorry, you do 3 limited reviews, June, September and December. When you are doing the fourth quarter, the last one, then no ADT 3 will be accepted, because if you have done 9 months of audit, then there is no reason that you should not be doing the rest of the audit. And clause 8 part 1 of first schedule also has included one thing which I forgot to mention, that the incoming auditor can also ask from you the reasons why you want to resign. The reasons separately also he may ask, and you are free to inform the incoming auditor. The retiring auditor is free to inform the incoming auditor the reasons why he wants to retire or he has filed ADT 3. Next, Devan, next. Yes, definition of director simpliciter আমি আগেই বলেছি। Director simpliciter মানে ordinary director who is not a managing director or whole time director and is required only in board meetings of the company and not paid any remuneration except for attending such meetings. এইটা একটু এবার clause 11 part 1 first schedule একটু ভালো করে ডিফাইন করে দিয়েছি। Next, Devan. Amendment in clause 4 part 1 of second schedule, substantial interest. বলছে cooling of period after completion of tenure as director from the date of completion of his tenure as director. তার মানে কেউ যদি কোনো কোম্পানিতে ডিরেক্টর থাকে, then for 2 years there has to be a compulsory cooling off of that particular person. এর মধ্যে অন্য কিছু কথা বলে নি এর মধ্যে। Suppose if you are statutory auditor of a particular entity, the guidance note on independence of auditors states that if you are a statutory auditor, then you must go for a compulsory 1 year cooling after that financial year, and then take up any internal assignment of that particular organization. But if you are the internal auditor of a particular year, then immediately thereafter in the next year, you can, and as far as director is concerned, I've already mentioned that there has to be a cooling off of 2 years. Next. There has to be a compulsory peer review of all auditors in case of audit of listed companies, and mandatory FRN membership number is required, and UDIN is also required with effect from 1st July 2019 for all non-corporate, corporate, attest and assurance functions. It is compulsorily required for the auditor to give. Next. অ্যাডভার্টাইজমেন্ট গাইডলাইন্সে দু একটা জিনিস বলে দিই, রাইট আপ টু ইনক্লুড, এর মধ্যে ইম্পর্টেন্ট জিনিসটা বলে দিই, বিকজ there are it will be huge. You are always permitted to give details in a write up, and write up includes in the social networking website also, and in case of firms they were also allowed to mention affiliation with a network registered with the institute. And in case of individuals, members allowing mentioning position held as director, managing director in a management consultancy company registered with the institute is also allowed. Next, Joe. Next, Devan. Next. এবার হচ্ছে in the new write up এ বলছে it shall be honest and truthful. এসবে ইম্পর্টেন্ট জিনিসটা যেটা সেটা হচ্ছে যে it should not be having a font size of more than 14. এটা বোধহয় নেক্সট এতে আছে। নেক্সট এতে যাও। Next. The write-up should not be of font size exceeding 14. So you can prepare a write-up and give it and submit it. There is no problem, but the font size should not be more than 14, and the membership number FRN as may be applicable is mandatory to be mentioned in the write-up, and the write-up should not contain any information about achievements, awards, except the awards given by the central or state government or any other position held or any accreditations granted by any organization. Egulo will not be allowed, and the institute has the right to issue directive for removal or withdrawal of the whole write-up or of any part thereof. Next. Next, Divan. Next.
Divan, next.
Divan, next.
Divan, are you here? I think network of Divan has some problem. Divan, can you hear me? Divan?
Advertisement guidelines. খোলো তো। ঠিক আছে, কি হলো? দাঁড়াও, আসুক আবার। দাঁড়াও, একটু ওয়েট করে যাই, এসে যাবে মনে হচ্ছে। আর বেশি প্রায় শেষের দিকেই চলে এসেছি।
Yes, yes.
বেশি বাকি নেই।
I got disconnected, so kindly again make me a host so that I can share the screen.
Yes, yes, yes. Advertisement guidelines. হ্যাঁ, 60 এর কাছাকাছি এসো। এটা অ্যাডভার্টাইজমেন্ট গাইডলাইন্স আমরা ছিলাম। আরেকটু আগে যাও, আরেকটু আগে। হ্যাঁ, ঠিক আছে, এইটা হয়ে গেছে। এর পরেরটা, এর পরেরটা দেবেন, ঠিক পরেরটা। আচ্ছা আচ্ছা, এর পরেরটা পরেরটা হ্যাঁ এর পরেরটা ইয়েস না আমি শেষের দিকে এসেছিলাম হ্যাঁ এক হ্যাঁ ঠিক আছে এটা শেষের দিকেই চলে এসেছিলাম আর লাস্টেরটা আনজাস্টিফাইড হ্যাঁ এবার ইম্পর্টেন্ট জিনিস হচ্ছে if there is any unjustified removal of auditors if there is any unjustified removal of auditors then the auditor the existing auditor can electronically file a complaint of unjustified removal with a small fee of rupees 1000 which is permitted by NEFT to the institute for unjustified removal of auditors. And that unjustified removal will be against the company or will be against the client, not against the incoming auditor. If the existing auditor is aggrieved, if the existing auditor is aggrieved, then he may file a disciplinary complaint against the incoming auditor under clause 8 part 1 of schedule 1 and clause 9 part 1 of schedule 2. And at the same time, for unjustified removal, he can also file before the Ethical Standards Board of the Institute a complaint electronically for unjustified removal with a submission of fees of rupees 1000 and the form is available in the institute site. Anyone can go and download that form for any unjustified. আর কিছু way আর কোনো স্লাইড নেই বোধহয় আর কিছু আছে নেক্সট হ্যাঁ হ্যাঁ ভলিউম 3 তে কিছু দেওয়া নেই only দেওয়া আছে all case laws have been numbered for ready reference it has been indexed and it will be published very soon এর মধ্যে একটা জিনিস আমি which I have not covered which is not in the slide but I would like to just mention that is one minute, just give me 1 minute. This is regarding the disciplinary mechanism. The disciplinary mechanism, there are two statutory authorities. One is the Board of Discipline and one is the Disciplinary Committee. Now, the Board of Discipline deals with Schedule 1 cases between CA to CA. Suppose a CA complains against a CA, it will go to the Board of Discipline. That is covered under Schedule 1. And Schedule 2, if a complaint is made by any organization or any auditee against the auditor, then it will be covered by Schedule 2 and it will go to the Disciplinary Committee. The Board of Discipline consists of 3 members, 2 council members and 1 government nominee. And the quorum is 2. Actually, the quorum for the meeting is 2 because in any case, a quorum there has to be a quorum cannot be 1 because then the meeting cannot be conducted. And if in the absence of the presiding officer, the council member will become the presiding officer of the Board of Discipline, and the presence and of the Board of Discipline. And the presence of the government nominee is compulsory for the Board of Discipline to continue. So this is and the penalties that can be given by the Board of Discipline. There are 3 penalties. They can either award punishments, either or any one of them, or together. That is a reprimand or removal from membership for a maximum period of 3 months. Or a fine up to rupees 1 lakh. That is Board of Discipline. As far as the Disciplinary Committee is concerned, it consists of 5 members which consists of 3 council members and 2 government nominees. And if the presiding officer, who is normally a council member and the president of the institute, is absent, then the senior most government nominee will become the presiding officer. And there also the quorum is 3, and the presence of at least 1 government nominee is compulsory for the meetings to be conducted. And there the punishment the maximum punishment that can be awarded is either the member can be reprimanded, or there can be a penalty up to 5 lakhs, that is the maximum, or a member can be removed up to permanent. A member can be removed for a particular period, which may go on be up to life also. So these are the 3 provisions. These are the 3 punishment awards punishments that can be awarded by the disciplinary committee also. The Board of Discipline is running under 21A, Section 21A of the CA Act, and the disciplinary committee is running under Section 21B of the CA Act. So this is all. I think I think I have covered everything. I've covered corporate form of practice, tender guidelines, everything I've covered. And Devan has taken me to the thank you slide also. So I've completed my deliberation. 25 minutes, I think, 25 minutes before the normal closure. And now I am ready to accept questions from the floor. From the floor means we are habituated in saying the floor from all the listeners and viewers of today's VCM. Please, you can start with your questions, please. I'm ready to answer them. Bolo.
I'll request the participant, if they have any question, please put their hands up, then we can allow them to speak. But first of all, Devan will accommodate all the questions that have been put up in the and he will moderate the session. And if anybody else has something to say, they will raise their hands in the system. I will allow them to speak. Thank you.
Shumanda, since I got disconnected in between, so I missed one question at the beginning.
All right.
So can you just put it back? Till then, I'll ask sir to answer one query. One of our member, Madam Amrita Chattopadhyay, she has asked that why this 15% restriction is there. So probably she is speaking about the disclosure requirement where we need to disclose to our clients if the fees is beyond 15%. So if you could just clarify that point.
Yes. Initially in the 2009 code also, the restriction was 40%, as high as 40, but it has been reduced to 15, and that provision also has been deferred for the time being. It is not compulsory since 1/7/2020, but the principle and the logic for having it is that you should not be too much dependent on a particular client. Actually, that is the whole logic. But it has also straight away given exemptions, saying that if you are engaged in doing bank audit or any government audit, which will automatically come to you, then that restriction will also not be applicable, and it will also not be applicable if your total billing is less than 5 lakhs per annum. In other words, it is only applicable to private clients basically. And there it should not, if it is more than 15%, then proper disclosures have to be made. That is what the law says. But due to the pandemic and other teething problems, maybe the application of such provisions have been deferred for the time.
Where this disclosure has to be made?
Can I
Disclosure has to be made.
Can I give a reason? Hello. সুমন্তদা, হ্যালো
আপনি বলুন, শোনা যাচ্ছে।
বলছি আমি যখন এডিটি 3 দিচ্ছি, আমি সেখানে এটা লিখতে পারি যে আমি রেকমেন্ডেড ফিজ অ্যাজ পার আইসিএআই পাচ্ছি না বলে আমি রিজাইন করছি।
Yes. হ্যাঁ, না পারছি না বলতে কিরম পারছো না, মানে কিরম
রেকমেন্ডেড ফিজ মানে রেকমেন্ডেড বাই আইসিএআই। হ্যাঁ, so the client is not interested to give me that fees, so I am not interested to do the work.
I think that could be a valid reason. That is a valid reason, I would say, because why I'm saying it is a valid reason, because those are recommended scale of fees. অশোক তুমি প্রশ্ন করলে তো? অশোক করলে তো প্রশ্নটা? হ্যাঁ। দেখো তোমার এটা রেকমেন্ডেড স্কেল অফ ফিস। তুমি জানো লাস্ট রেকমেন্ডেড স্কেল অফ ফিসটা 11/2/2020 এসছে, রিভাইজ রেকমেন্ডেড স্কেল অফ ফিস। এটা ইনস্টিটিউটের সাইটে আছে। হ্যাঁ, এবার বেশিরভাগ কেসেই দেখা যায় যে it is not possible for the client to pay that much fees. That is why it has remained recommended, it is not mandatory. True. But at the same time, তোমার যখন peer review হবে, they will ask a question.
Yes,
that
they've
the peer reviewer will have to fill up a point which says that whether you have charged recommended fees or not from the institute, and if you have not charged, then you have to mention why also. So that will tantamount to
compulsion.
Reason. Compulsion, yes. That will
one
be
type of compulsion.
Kintu jeta dekha jacche, yes. What the regulators are trying, they are actually trying to promote auditor independence, actually. But they are the various they want to protect the interest of the auditors, actually.
Yes, right.
They don't want them to be removed for flimsy reasons. Karon onek shomoy they understand that the auditee at times puts undue pressure
hello
on the just এটাই হচ্ছে আন্ডারলাইং লজিক। হ্যাঁ, বলো।
আরেকটা কোশ্চেন হচ্ছে, ধরুন আমি অডিট করেছি, ইনকাম ট্যাক্স বুকস এখন রিজেক্ট করে দিয়েছে, রিজেক্ট করে অ্যাডিশন করেছে, ঠিক আছে, তো আমি কি ডিসিপ্লিন অ্যাকশনে পড়তে পারি তার জন্য?
Not at all, একদমই পড়তে পারো না, because income tax authorities is a separate body. They have the right to scrutinize books of accounts if only the income tax officer through the commissioner or the chief commissioner complains against the chartered accountant to the institute that in a tax audit report we have found these anomalies which should not have existed, then only the institute will write a love letter to you. Otherwise, just merely making additions will not put you into any jeopardy or any risk at all.
Okay, thank you. Okay, thank you.
Bolo, next.
Just a minute. We will take all questions. So let me first complete the questions that are there in the chat box. We will go one by one. So in relation to the first question, where the 15% if the fees is more than 15% disclosure is required, so there is a trailing question. There is another question to it, where this disclosure has to be made.
কোথায় ডিসক্লোজারটা করতে হবে? This is mentioned as per the volume 1 of Code of Ethics. It is mentioned that this is the person from where you are receiving more than 15%. In the audit report, or in the notes or anywhere where you have conducted 15% of the total A, that you have to mention there, so that the users of the financial statements understand that the auditor has charged more than 15% of the total billing. But let us not be much into it. There have been a lot of representations coming from different quarters. That is why it has also been kept deferred. But this is only related to private clients, as I had said earlier, not related to any government clients or any other clients. But it has to be mentioned in somewhere in the audit report that you have charged, the charges are more than 15% of the total charges of total billing of the client, total billing of the auditor.
Okay. Next question is from Bishwajit Pariyal. So his question is whether a chartered accountant can act as an insurance agent.
No, it can not include ব্রোকারেজ লিখে দিল না আমার নাম, স্লাইডটা ছিল 1 মিনিট, এখানে লিখছে চেঞ্জ করে ফার্স্টে ছিল ফার্স্টে ক্লজ 26 ছিল ইন্স্যুরেন্স ফাইন্যান্স ব্রোকারেজ, ওটা লেখা ছিল, এখন ওখানে অ্যাড করে দিয়েছে ব্র্যাকেটে নট ইনক্লুডিং ইন্স্যুরেন্স এজেন্সি, তার মানে নট ইন ইউ ক্যানট বি অ্যান ইন্স্যুরেন্স এজেন্ট, ওটা অ্যাড করে দিয়েছে ইন দ্য in clause 26 of the management consultancy services. You cannot be an insurance agent actually.
এই প্রসঙ্গে আমি আরেকটা কোশ্চেন করতে চাই।
হ্যাঁ বলুন কল্যাণদা বলুন।
কেন মানে কোনো একটা ফার্ম অডিট ফার্মের পার্টনার কি আরেকটা ইন্স্যুরেন্স সার্ভে ফার্মের পার্টনার হতে পারে, এবং সেক্ষেত্রে কি অডিট ফার্মকে তাকে পার্ট টাইম পার্টনার হিসেবে ধরা হবে না ফুল টাইম পার্টনার হিসেবে ধরা হবে?
না না না, এই যে ম্যানেজমেন্ট কনসালটেন্সি সার্ভিসেস আছে, the 27 management consultancy services, you can hold full-time COP as well as you can do management consultancy services also, because they are permitted under 224 of the CA Act 1949. Hence, you are no way you are becoming part-time or anything of that sort. Suppose you are a partner in your own firm and you decide to do management consultancy services also, not in corporate form maybe, your firm wants to to doing management consultancy services 27টা আছে, there you can always do those services and you will not be treated as a part-time partner, you will be treated as a full-time partner holding full-time COP, no issue করলেন একদম
রাইট,
ঠিক আছে।
The next question in the chat box is from CA Shubhabrata Ghosh. The question is there any provision in new ethics about signing of provisional estimated projected financial statement? Earlier it was not permitted. But this is wrong. It was permitted earlier also.
No, earlier it was 100% permitted.
Sir, actually your voice is breaking continuously.
আচ্ছা কিন্তু হওয়ার তো কথা নয়,
showing that there is a low bandwidth, so
সে তো আর আচ্ছা না আমি বলছি I'll tell you, I'm telling you, আচ্ছা আচ্ছা দেখো তো এবার সুবিধা হচ্ছে, বেটার
ক্লিয়ার,
এটা কি বেটার হয়েছে?
ক্লিয়ার
স্যার এটা তো সাউন্ড এটাতে তো সাউন্ডের কোনো প্রবলেম নেই, মানে আপনার মাঝে মাঝে কি হচ্ছে ভিডিওটা আটকে যাচ্ছে আর ওই সাউন্ডটা শোনা যাচ্ছে না,
ভিডিও আটকে যাক, ভিডিও আমি অফ করে দিচ্ছি, হ্যাঁ ভিডিওটা অফ করে দিন, এবার ঠিক আছে বেটার?
স্যার আপনি বলুন বুঝতে পারবো।
আচ্ছা, it was previously also there in AAS 34 and AAS 35, provisional and projected, it was there. Now the AAS 34 and 35 have all been done away with in 2008 or 2009 বোধহয়।
আপনাকে শোনা যাচ্ছে না সুমন্তদা?
হ্যাঁ বুঝতে পারছি, মুশকিল হয়ে গেল।
আমি শুনতে পাচ্ছি, পরিষ্কার শুনতে পাচ্ছি।
হ্যাঁ শুনতে পাচ্ছেন তো?
শোনা যাচ্ছে
So it was hello, it was under AAS 34 and 35 earlier, but now it has been.
When can you hear me?
And yes.
Sumanda, we can hear you and we can also hear sir.
But I can't hear you.
No, I cannot. Now I cannot hear Sumanto. I cannot.
ঠিক আছে, আচ্ছা ঠিক আছে আমি বলে দিচ্ছি, আপনি AAS 34 আর 35 এর যে ইকুইভ্যালেন্টটা যেটা স্ট্যান্ডার্ড জোন অডিটিং হয়েছে সেগুলোকে দেখে নিতে হবে, সেটা আমার নাম্বারটা আমার মুখস্থ নেই, কিন্তু প্রভিশনাল আর প্রজেক্টেড অলওয়েজ ছিল, বাট উইথ সো মেনি রাইডার্স ছিল কেউ তোমার থেকে কাজটা মানে তোমাকে দিয়ে কেউ প্রভিশনাল বা প্রজেক্টেড করাবে কিনা, দ্যাট ইজ আ ডিফারেন্ট ইস্যু, বাট প্রজেক্টেড অ্যান্ড প্রাইভেট প্রভিশনাল আর প্রজেক্টেড ওয়াজ অলওয়েজ দেয়ার, এখনো আছে। এবার বলো নেক্সট কোয়েশ্চেন বলো।
Okay, the next question is from Shumanda itself. So he is asking a question relating to UDIN. Do we need to mention UDIN for internal audit or management?
100%. UDIN has to be mentioned for internal audit also. Yes. Next.
Even in provisional audit also, provisional balance sheet. Huh?
And also, obviously, in provisional balance sheet also, because you didn't also cover certification also. So if you issue a
provisional
certificate,
balance sheet is not a postmortem thing.
is not a
Not a postmortem thing. This is
no. If you have not utilized, if you have not put the UD in, and it goes to the bank manager, and the bank manager doesn't get the verification from the institute, then he will feel that some person,
can you easily certify?
In the street has.
Can you easily certify the provisional balance sheet? Huh? Hello.
Yes, you can certify. As I said, it was AAS 34 and 35 has been renumbered. I cannot remember renumbering. I can let you know later on, because AAS has been auditing and assurance standards has been renamed as SAS. So that has been renamed. That is the only difference. Otherwise, you can continue certifying provisional balance sheets and but with a lot of disclaimers as given by the institute. You have to abide by the guidelines as mentioned by the institute, and only
like that.
You only cannot put your stamp and sign and say that this is as per institute guidelines.
There should be audit report also. There should be a report also.
Sir, if I may be permitted to speak a little on this. On estimated and projected financial statements, we can give a report as per SAE 3400. SAE 3400, which serves as But in case of a provisional financial statement, you cannot issue an audit report. 1. 2, because once you issue an audit report, it will no more be provisional. It will become an audited report. Secondly, you cannot just sign on the provisional financial statement. Then you must be preparing that financial statement. Only then you can sign on it. So in that case, there is another standard that I do not remember the number.
There should be a standard.
Yes, there is a standard. There is a standard.
There is. In every provisional or estimated balance sheet, there should be a report. And report as per the norms.
Yes, but
as per the SAE, there is a norms. For
yes. So and once we sign, I need to generate the UD.
Please repeat the SAE number. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir. Sir, I have already shared it in the chat box. It is SAE 3400.
Okay. Thank you. Okay, thank you.
Next bolo. Devan, next question.
Yes. There is no more question. Can us certify estimated balance sheet? Again, it's the same question. Shubhamda, a chartered accountant can certify estimated projected financial statements subject to following the norms as given in SAE 3400.
আচ্ছা, সুবীর ঘোষের একটা কোয়েশ্চেন ছিল চ্যাট বক্সে দেখলাম রিগার্ডিং এনওসি ফ্রম আউটগোয়িং অডিটর। ওটা কি কোয়েশ্চেনটা ছিল?
Question is that can you hear me, Sumanto?
হ্যাঁ, শুনতে পাচ্ছি। বলো
Sumanto?
হ্যাঁ, বলো শুনতে পাচ্ছি।
One thing is that one outgoing auditor has given the NOC to the director of the company on the request of the director of the company, as written as to whom it may concern. My question is that incoming auditor should rely upon that NOC, or he should directly write to the outgoing auditor to get the NOC. Can you understand?
এটা কি হ্যাঁ বুঝেছি, এটা বডি কর্পোরেট না নন কর্পোরেট?
Body corporate is a body corporate audit.
না, অনেক রকম ব্যাপার আছে। এটা First, প্রথমত, the existing auditor has to be approached by the company, because he's appointed for 5 years. Subidha, try to understand.
No. Everything is okay. Now my question is that on the request.
No. Request.
দিয়েছে কিন্তু
that is no issue, but ADT3 দেবে, তারপর সেটা এর রিকোয়েস্টে ADT3 দিতে পারে, তারপর the incoming auditor has to write to the retiring auditor or the existing auditor that I have been appointed through ADT1. So
okay, that is my question. Is that but the existing auditor that I know. That question is that my question is that the existing retiring auditor has given the NOC to the director as mentioned as to meet him in concern. Should I rely upon that NOC or should the incoming auditor write directly to?
No, the incoming auditor has to write directly to the existing auditor and also ensure that it is filed. Otherwise, he cannot upload that ADT1.
Okay, thank you. Okay, thank you, Sumanta, thank you.
আর কিছু আছে?
There is no more question in the chat box. So if anyone has any question, so he can unmute himself and raise the question. Okay. If an outgoing auditor gives his resignation to the company but does not file ADT3, what should the new auditor do?
Well, this is a tricky one because he has given resignation how? In writing only, isn't it? In this case, so who has asked this question? I think Ritu.
No. Shubham Bera.
Shumon Bera has asked this question.
Shubham Bera.
Yes, Shubham Bera has asked this question. Now, if he gives a resignation, the only mode of communication in ROC is electronically. Now you have to communicate. Now, if just merely writing a resignation letter and not filing ADT3 means nothing actually.
That's true.
So you have to file ADT3. If you don't file ADT3, then the question of resignation does not want to file ADT3, and he wants to raise issues relating to the appointment of the incoming auditor. Then those issues have to be addressed because this provision was brought into the statute to protect the interest of existing auditors, and so that whimsically clients cannot remove auditors like the drop of a hat. So that has to be ensured. So he has to file ADT3. Otherwise, that resignation letter to the company has got no meaning and no sanctity.
Now,
আরেকটা এসে can you elaborate on the punishment of the IIFA মানে ILFS বোধহয় ILFS বোধহয় mean করেছে actually that ILFS case institute had initially what happened NFRA, National Financial Reporting Authority, that was their first client. It got constituted in March 2018. Yes, March 2018 it got constituted, and the rules also came out sometime in November 2018, and that was their first case where they held the firm and some members guilty, but the matter has now gone to court. But NFRA has stringently the National Financial Reporting Authority has made sweeping statements against the audit firm as well as the engagement partner in the ILFS case. Since the matter is sub judice now, because they have also gone to court, the particular audit firm, the concerned audit firm has gone to court. So let us not discuss what has happened, but in the ILFS case, the National Financial Reporting Authority has held the engagement partner as well as the audit firm guilty of professional misconduct as per section 132 subsection 4 of the Companies Act 2013. And it has also told the institute not to proceed further, because once the NFRA takes up a case, then no other agency can parallelly continue with the case. Shubham Bera has said that he has given in writing, so that ADT 3, without filing ADT 3, it doesn't stand. Ar kichu ache?
There is no more question in the chat box, and and I think so I think Shumanda, can you hear us?
Okay, I can hear you.
Okay. So Shumanda, I think we are at the end of this program now, and it's 1 p.m. So we had a wonderful session from 11 a.m. to 1 p.m. There were some technical glitches in between, but nevertheless, it was a wonderful program. I would request CA Shuman Chaudhuri to do the closing formalities with the permission of CA Ashok Samanto.
Ashok, formally we can close the meeting. Can we close the meeting formally? No, we can't hear you.
Shumanda, yes, please give the vote of thanks.
Many thanks to Devan Patra, who had moderated the session so well, and thanks to our own CA Sumanto Guha, who has been speaked on the subject for around 2 hours. And this is the beauty of this VCM: it starts on time and ends on time. And the people, the one thing that people who have participants who have joined are with us till the end. And we thanks on behalf of the Howrah Study Circle to make it happen and to organize this VCM and give us the opportunity to organize this type of VCM in the future also. I'll thanks Devan Patra as well as Sumanto Guha has given his time and putting his whole effort to elaborate us about the code of ethics, which is the most required of this hour. And as you know, as per the 10 hours VCM requirement, also 2 hours requirement of this course of ethics is a must wanted from the institute side on our part. Thank you, Sumanto, for giving a wonderful deliberation, and we do understand better. We'll be hoping you will also give us time in the near future. And another, we are holding this same session on ethics tomorrow with Vidhannagar CS Study Circle. Thank you, sir. Welcome to the sir. I will stopping the recording here. So Devan, I will be stopping the recording.